Hi friends, Sarah here with The Holy Mess, and this is day 11 of the Faith Over Fear series. I am sitting out on my front porch. Let me give you a little view. This is my front porch today. It's rainy, it's a little cold, but I can hear birds singing, and it just felt so good to get outside that I decided to come sit outside to record this video for you today. Today's passage is a special one for me. It's Psalm 121. I'm going to read it in just a second, and I'm going to tell you all about why it's so meaningful to me. But I will start off by telling you this was one of the passages that was read at our wedding. My husband Mike and I, we've been married for over 25 years. We might be on 26 now. And this is still so meaningful to me, and I think of that every single time. So let's start off with reading it. Psalm 121, and this is the New International Version. I've had quite a few people ask me about it. That's what I'm reading from. Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. When I was in college, I went to a Lutheran Christian college, Concordia, in Mequon, Wisconsin. I had the opportunity to take a class, which was a trip to Israel, to the Holy Land. And my husband came too, wasn't my husband at the time. And unbeknownst to me, he was going to propose on this trip. We knew that we were going to get married, but we're not planning to get married, not planning to get engaged and then married until later, because he's a couple years older than me, and I wanted to finish college. One of the things that was really important to my dad was my college education, and that I finish college before I get married, because he just was really afraid that if I got married I wouldn't finish. And for him, he never went to college. That was just such a big deal. So I had said yes, I'd be willing to do that. So I didn't think that we were going to get married or engaged for quite a while. So long story short, what actually ended up happening is I graduated from college early. I graduated in 3.5 years, I think, instead of 4.5, with a degree in education, because I really wanted to get married. I didn't want to wait anymore. And my husband was leaving. At that point, he was going to the seminary, which for our denomination is either in St. Louis or Indiana, and he went to the one in St. Louis. And so we were spending time apart, which was just really hard. And it's amazing how motivated you could be when you've got a wedding as a motivator. So that was what ended up happening. But I wasn't surprised that he proposed, but I was not expecting it at that time. And he proposed while we were in the Holy Land. My family actually knew, because he asked for my hand in marriage from my parents, which I thought was awesome. And funny story, I will share a link to it from my blog. My brother was there sitting at the table at the time when my now husband went to ask my parents if, could he ask for my hand in marriage. And when I first started dating Mike, and we dated long distance because we met at a youth evangelism camp called Ongoing Ambassadors for Christ. And then he went back to his home in Wisconsin, and I was in my home in Illinois. I told my brother, I was still in high school at the time, I said, that is going to be the guy that I'm going to marry. I told my brother Daniel that. And I really hadn't dated a whole lot, and I didn't really know Mike. We didn't live in the same town, and this was long before internet. This was before cell phones. We had very expensive long-distance phone calls, and we had letters. That was how we could communicate. So when I said to my brother, that's going to be the guy I'm going to marry, my brother's like, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. How can you know you're going to marry this guy? You just met him. And he said, I bet you $50 you are not going to marry him. So when Mike proposed, or asked my parents if he could propose, my brother was sitting there at the table and hadn't really said anything. He was still in high school too. Yeah, he was probably like freshman or something in high school. So when my mom turned to my brother and said, well, you know, your sister's going to get married. Do you have anything to say about this? My brother said, well, I guess there goes my $50. And then at our wedding reception, we made a big to-do of him giving me the $50 because I won the bet and I really did marry Mike. And so I've got pictures of that on my website. I'll share a link to it in the comments. It was just a lot of fun. But unbeknownst to me, Mike was going to propose in the Holy Land, and I did not know that. So when we were preparing for this trip, we had some different class things that we participated in that the professor who was leading the trip was, teaching us and wanting to prepare us and things like that for what we would see when we were there. And one of them was Psalm 121. That I just read. When we had our first get together, this professor, Dr. Mashke, said once we go to the Holy Land, you will never look at this passage again. And it's so true because when we were on the Sea of Galilee, you can walk along the beach there, and then we actually took a boat ride where we went into the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and they even stopped the boat for a while so we could look around. And I believe we read this passage during the boat ride. There are just beautiful hills all around the area, and the Sea of Galilee is not huge, but it's pretty good size. Like you can see to the other side, but it's in the far distance. And we read this and we looked at this where it says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And just to think that that's what that's what Jesus saw when he did different miracles, like calming the storm and walking on water. And, seeing that is it was a beautiful, reflective moment. And then a few days later, I got engaged, which was in Tiberias on the beach right there. So it was a really cool thing. I've had a lot of people ask, like, well, do you have pictures? I've got a couple pictures of the trip. I'll see if I can post a few. But, this was before selfies, you guys, and before everything was posted on Instagram and Facebook. Like I said, we didn't even have cell phones, so I've got a few photos, but I don't have the whole thing Instagram worthy because this was long before that. But this passage is so meaningful to me. And one encouragement that I want to give you reading through Psalm 21 today, where it says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. I'm going to wait a second for that truck to go by. I decided to come outside. Of course, now there's going to be all the loud traffic. So he will not let your foot slip. One of the things I really struggled with when I was on my weight loss journey and needed to lose weight and struggled with losing weight, one of the things that was so challenging for me and is so challenging for so many women in our groups is feeling like you failed. Feeling like you are backsliding, feeling like, I've got to start all over. How many times have you said that, whether it's with your weight or your finances or a relationship? Like, I'm back to the beginning, I'm back to square one. And one of the things I've really learned is that is not true. There is no way that you can go back to square one. There is no way that you would fail. And the reason for that is each time you do something new, you learn about yourself, you learn about what works for you, you learn what doesn't work, and you grow in faith. And so, okay, that's really loud. I'm going to go inside, you guys, because I want you to be able to hear this. Okay, so walk with me. We're going to walk inside my house because of that very loud truck. Okay, I'll finish the video in here. So we were talking about one of the things that is so difficult is feeling like you have failed or feeling like you're back to square one. And that is actually impossible because each time you do something, you learn something new. You learn about yourself. You learn about what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And when I was in therapy, losing my 100 pounds for the final time, this was one of the things that my therapist said to me. And he said, think about it like when you hike up a mountain. And I used to live in Colorado, so we hiked up all all kinds of mountains. If you are halfway up the mountain, you're on the trail, and you slip and fall, you fall down right where you are. You don't slide all the way back to the beginning. That would actually be impossible. And it's the same with all of these other things, whether it's weight loss or getting out of debt or, improving relationships or whatever areas you struggle with. If it's depression, if it's anxiety, if it's mental health issues, you don't go back to the beginning. You don't fall down and go back to the beginning. Instead, you fall down right where you are, and then you get back up and you keep going. So that is my encouragement for you today, especially looking at verse 3, where it says, "He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber." Keep going. The Lord watches over you. He will neither slumber nor sleep. So that's my encouragement for you today. Thanks for hanging with me when I had to come inside with the loud truck. But again, we are reading from the 30-day Bible reading plan, and this is day 11, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.